Okay, so there's really two parts to this class then tonight, if this opens and works. The first part is how taste gets transferred, just to understand the background information of how does taste move from a food to something else, and then the application of that to an oven, a stove, a toaster, a microwave, whatever else we're going to discuss tonight. So there's really two halves to the class. There is the how it moves, and then the practical part of it. Just to review one basic concept before we start. We have a concept called tam kicker, which is something that's very fundamental to the kosher kitchen. Right? Tam kicker means that when the Torah prohibited pork, it didn't just prohibit pork itself. It's not limited to the fibers and the flesh of the animal. It extends to that flavor that gives off. And therefore, that's the problem, right? When you cook a piece of pork in a pot, so even if you clean the pot out, that pot will have the remaining taste of non-kosher inside of it, and that's what'll be a problem. When we get to our kosher kitchen, that's really our question. Often it's not going to be a mixture of, you just directly cook the milk and meat together, but often, your milk will splatter on the side of your meat pot, or you take the wrong spoon, and it's generally we're talking about flavor or taste is normally going to be the problem of issue here. So let's get started. The most basic rule of thumb, I remember when I first got married, my rabbi told me, his name was Rabbi Berger, he said, the rule of thumb, if you want to know the best way, number one rule for a kosher kitchen, that is to try your best to keep your kitchen clean. So when your kitchen is clean, then you just have less problems. Most problems tend to arise because you left your milk pot out on top of your stove, and then you started cooking your meat, and your milk pot was still there, and then it's splattered. But if you would have cleaned it and put it away, it wouldn't have splattered. Or it just, things tend to get, when these are dirtier, then it tends to just cause more problems. When it's clean, you just take out what you're using, put it away when you're done. This is, somewhat of a personality thing, and it depends, each person has to know themselves. It should not be a source of stress for you. But just as a sagely advice that I got from my rabbi, passing it forward, I can't say me and my wife always employed it ourselves, but just as a good advice, the cleaner your kitchen is, definitely the less questions, the less things spill on the wrong thing, and it seems like there's interesting things going on over there. You agree? Okay, we got you guys' agreement. That's good. But yeah.
So I know you're supposed to keep it separate. What if you have only one fridge? How do you separate it? I mean, you're just gonna do the best you can.
Right. So one fridge is a great question. I actually forgot to include refrigerators on it. I think we go through every single other item in the kitchen but refrigerators. But we'll get to it. Let's first, right now, discuss. If I don't get to it, remind me that I forgot to put it on here.
Sure.
But let's first just discuss the background information of that question, which is how would taste get transferred? That we now have to see, well, how would that apply to a refrigerator? How would that apply to an oven? Where's the potential risk here? And then how do we safeguard ourselves from it? So, our basic question to start off really is taste transfers. And the question with that is, how exactly does taste get transferred? So if these are the guys cooking in your kitchen, be careful that it might not end up good. But there's two parts to transferring taste. And that is, there's something called, I guess you can call it like an inducer. This would be something like heat or salt. We'll discuss in a second the examples of it. Things that cause taste to be transferred from point A to point B. And then there's a medium that the taste gets transferred through. So we're going to go now through the 5 inducers, 5 processes that can be going on that will cause taste to transfer. At the same time, there's carriers or mediums that are kind of the carriers of the taste from point A to point B. Now, there's only 2 things that can really carry taste. That is either liquid or fat, meaning like a fatty piece of meat can transfer taste even though it's not liquid. So if you have something that is absolutely, totally dry on all sides, so let's say you have an absolutely dry, super hot meat pot and a super hot milk pot, but they're both totally dry to the touch, and the exteriors of them touch in a totally dry interaction, that's not a problem. The rabbi said you shouldn't do these things because it's going to spill and things are going to happen, but there's no transfer of taste if everything is totally dry. So you need to always have either a liquid medium or a fatty medium for taste to practically get transferred. Now, in what situation are they going to get transferred? We mentioned in the past, let's say you accidentally took a meat spoon and you ate your cereal with it. You have milk, which is milky, and you have your Cheerios, let's say, your Wheaties, and you eat it with a fleshik meat spoon by accident. So we've mentioned in the past, since everything is cold here, right, even though you have liquid, you have the medium to get taste transferred, you also have what I'll refer to as the inducer, which is a think I borrowed that term from Rabbi Forst's book I showed you last week. But it's the process that kind of pushes the taste from point A to point B. Since everything is cold here in a bowl of milk, so again, you shouldn't try to avoid it, because whenever you start mixing milk and meat, things just happen. But for sure, ex post facto, nothing happened to your spoon. Your spoon is totally fine. Yeah.
In that case, how do you finish?
So, very good question. If you use your meat spoon with milk on it, you have to just really rinse it off, because we're just concerned with the external residue. However, do not make the mistake of rinsing it off in hot water, because if you now put hot water on it, that hot water will smash that milk into your meat spoon. So rinse it off in cold water, probably if you have two sinks, if you have that luxury. Put it over the milk sink, because you're spilling milk off into that sink. Rinse it off in cold water, and then just inspect. I mean, you see milk, if you do it right away and you don't wait till it's sitting on the counter for 3 weeks and it's not coagulated on it, then it'll be able to rinse off pretty quickly, and you could wipe it with a towel if you want also. If it's very fatty milk, maybe double check there's no fat on it, but generally that's not a problem. Okay, so there's 5 parts of this process, 5 potential processes that can induce the transfer of taste. So let's just start with number 1. Number 1 is probably the most classic example, and that is heat, which means if something is hot, that could cause taste to get transferred. Like we said, the classic case, you took the wrong pot out of the pantry, and you're cooking milk inside of a meat pot. So now, as soon as you pour the milk and nothing happens, everything's cold. Take it out and rinse it out. Once it gets hot, so now it becomes a problem, because the taste of the milk can now get embedded in the pot, and the pot can now have milk and meat flavor, and the previous meat flavor of the pot can now come out and get cooked into the milk. So what is the temperature that is considered hot? So the Gemara's, the Code of Jewish Law says the temperature is called, in Hebrew, Yad Solet Espo, which means Yad is a hand. A hand will retract when it touches this temperature. It means it's hot enough that if you touch it, you'll jump back from it. There's a dispute amongst the rabbis exactly how to quantify that into a degree. So for sure, the most strict opinion is 110 degrees Fahrenheit. For sure, if it's less than that, it's for sure fine. The range is like between 110 and 150. Generally, whenever you have one of these questions, just call a rabbi if something comes up, a mistake happens. It happens all the time. Just ask someone. And but for sure, if it was cold, then you know, everyone knows now. You don't even have to ask. Just rinse it off, and it's fine. Yeah.
So if you're eating outside in the middle of summer in Dallas, can you touch your milk?
You're saying because you're meat?
No, because it's over 110 degrees.
With what? With a meaty thing, you're saying?
Well, it's your hand.
Well, it's only going to be so right. Your hand. It's a good question. I'll ask you a better question. Yeah, can you drink a hot cup of coffee because your lip touches it? You're not kosher. I can't eat you. Right? Cannibalism is forbidden in the Torah.
That's true.
So you're cooking your flavor of your lips into your coffee. I mean,
right.
Ideally, when you drink the coffee, it's not so hot. But no, it's a great question. There's response on this topic. The generally understood answer to this is that living creatures don't give off taste. It's like a rule. Taste that comes from no longer living. Living creatures don't. Therefore, if you want to jump in a pot of hot water, knock yourself out. Outside normally will be a problem because it's hot outside, but it doesn't actually affect the food and the thing it's on. It'll take a really long time for it to actually get hot. But okay, so that is the main inducer. We'll get to the application of this in a second. But again, if it's not this hot, the only concern is the residue left behind. So again, if it's milk or if it's like cheese or cottage cheese, it can be a little oily or whatever. Maybe take a sponge, wipe it off a little just to make sure it all gets off. But again, we're just concerned here with external residue remaining on the item. Second,
would you use milk to replace your sponge off?
Yeah, so you would use a milk one, meaning you're treating this basically as a milk one. You would use a milk sponge to clean it, because right now, again, not in hot water. If it's not in hot water, nothing's going to come out of your let's say spoon, your meat spoon, and there's milk on it. So you want to keep that milk in the milk sink with the milk sponge. Just wipe it off, and then afterwards you can put it back where it was. Another user is called soaking. So the general rule with soaking is that it has to sit in the liquid for 24 hours for taste to get transferred, which would mean that in a normal scenario where you where you put let's say you put your milk, you left your place, you didn't clean up after breakfast, and you used that meat spoon in your cereal and milk, and you forgot to clean up that bowl, so now your meat spoon is sitting soaking inside of your milk. So if it would sit there for 24 hours, that would be a problem. The taste would now get transferred into that spoon, and that could be a problem. Additionally, by sharp liquids, like for example, if it's if something is soaking in, this is actually a picture of vinegar. If you're wondering, I'll try to find it. It's hard to know by looking at it, but evidently that's vinegar, according to Google Images. If it's soaking in a sharp liquid like vinegar or alcohol or something like that, then it would be as quick as 18 minutes, which would be a problem if, for example, you have a fork that you use to jab pickles out of your pickle jar with, and it's a meat fork, and you leave it in there for the beginning of the meal till the end of the meal. So it could make that all of the pickles now become, it could potentially make that all the pickles become meaty. Just again, that's just to preface one thing here. When we say you have a meat spoon or a meat fork, your meat spoon or meat fork can only become, it's only actually meaty not by designating it because we put it on that side of the kitchen and we call it a meat fork. It's going to be a meat fork if it was used with hot meat, right? So if it wasn't actually used with hot meat, like for example, drinking glasses are very rarely used with anything hot. So even though maybe you'll have, a meat set of drinking glasses and a milk set of drinking glasses, they're both really parve in real life because you've basically never really used them ever with anything hot. So just whenever we're talking about an item, you have to know, is it, even though we designated it as such, just remember, is it, have you ever actually used that for something hot of that type? But again, soaking again, so for regular items would be 24 hours. For meat, for sharp items, would be 18 minutes. Again, this is another issue with keeping your kitchen clean. If you have if you're soaking, you have one of those little tubs that you put your dirty dishes in, and yes, you have a milk one and a meat one, and you're soaking your milk in one, and all of a sudden you find that there's a piece of meat somehow got inside of your milk one. So if it was soaking there for 24 hours, it could cause a problem there. Which is again another advantage. These things just wouldn't come up if you keep it clean, which if that's possible, great. If not, then careful and try not to let the meat and the milk in. And if it does, it's not a big deal. Don't stress. Call the rabbi. It's all good. The third way, we had heat, we had soaking. The third way is salting. Salting is really not at all practical for us nowadays. We talk about salting, we're talking about like when you're making the meat kosher. We said previously you have to salt the meat. We're talking about when you're like heaping salt and putting like relative to the mass, like 50% salt to the object. So in a regular kitchen, when you have some salty food, that would never really cause a real salt transfer in general. If it was something that was very, very salty, it could be a problem, even if it's not that much. If it's just very salty to the taste, I would ask a question, but this is probably not going to come up too often. The fourth type is aroma, which now aroma is also not the most practical of transfers, because aroma is only when two things are both being cooked open. So you have a meat pan and a milk pan cooking in the oven in a closed area, and both are being cooked open at the same time. If not for that, then aroma won't be an issue. So it's only if you were to put in your oven at the same time an open meat dish and an open milk dish, which would definitely not be recommended for other reasons as well. So once we're not doing that, even if you were to put one in after the other one, which we'll get to in a second, aroma wouldn't be a problem. Aroma is a very limited problem. That's really only if it's in the same space and they're both open, which shouldn't come up very frequently. And the fifth one, which is probably the second most problematic after the first one of heat, is steam. We generally view steam as the exact same as the liquid itself, which means that if you have this pot and it's cooking, this steam is the same meat or milk status as whatever's being cooked in this pot. So if you have, salami's hanging on top of your stovetop or something like that, so then that could be a problem if you have milk steam going up over those hanging slabs, right? Because steam also, we'll get to in a second, ovens and stoves, but where steam can go and the problem steam can cause, but steam is considered the same as the item it's cooking, and therefore it could be a a problem with that, both by milk and by meat. Again, steam is only going to transfer the taste if it's hot. Steam works with the mechanism of heat, because if you have something that is, so you have steam and you have your salami and really high up, so it reaches the salami, but it's cold by the time it gets there, so then it won't, you have to rinse it off, but it won't embed itself in unless it's hot. But generally things that are close by to the stove, steam is hot when it comes out of the pot generally. Okay, that's really the basic background information to understand how taste transfers. In practical life, there's really three things. Things can touch, that could be a problem, which is normally a problem of either heat or steam. And again, these are only going to be a problem when you have generally a liquid medium there. Steam would be liquid, or a fatty piece of meat or something like that. Okay, any questions on up to here before we go into the practical kitchen itself, trying to apply these ideas? Everything makes sense? Okay, fantastic. So let's start with perhaps the most complex one, which is an oven. All of those who don't know what I'm talking about, there you go. Now, again, if you're, I don't want to single anyone out. If you're able to, it's for sure a luxury to have two of everything in your kosher kitchen. You can have 2 microwaves and 2 stoves and 2 ovens and 2 sinks and 2 counters. And if you're able to have that, that's amazing. It's wonderful. It'll probably save you questions, save you times of calling the rabbi, and save you issues. But in most situations, it's not necessary. And so we need to know it's also not practical. So we need to know how to use our space properly. If you have a 2-chamber oven, which this one is here, I've never really seen these in America. In Israel, a lot of people had 2-chamber ovens. This picture is an American picture, but I've never seen anyone's kitchen here that I've been in their house that has one of these. If you do have a 2-chamber oven, which if you wanted to set up a kosher kitchen and you were planning everything, it's a fine option because you have 2 separate ovens. This is basically fine. It's possible that generally they have 2 vents and they both go out separately and they don't air between each other at all because that's why each one cooks properly. I guess if you could double check that before you buy one if you were buying one. But this is an option for anyone who's planning on buying a new one. If you could buy them in America, I think you could. Then it's the easiest way to avoid anything with ovens. Fine. Second easiest way is, this is what I have always done. We just moved. Now we have a very nice kitchen with 2 ovens, which is very pleasant. We would cook pizza in the oven. What we always used to do was we had an oven. We just kept our oven meaty, and we had a little toaster oven. And we weren't as big on the milk dishes as the meat dishes in general. So we just used our milk in the toaster oven in general, which is an easy option also. But now we have 2, and we're very, very happy about that. Everyone's invited for milk or meat separately, not together. So you have an oven. So you want to use ovens. What are the potential problems with the oven? So the main problem with the oven is that you cook, let's say you cooked meat in it, and now there's stuff left behind in the oven. Intentionally, unintentionally, things can spill or splatter. Again, steam can rise as you're cooking it open to the top of the oven, internal top of the oven. It can embed taste there that can again later get pulled down by something else. Or sometimes it just leaves a residue there. Sometimes after you cook something, you take a tissue and you wipe the top of it. You see it's greasy, it's fatty. It's just there's some juices from the meat gets cooked up there. So now if you put in your milk dish right afterwards, if that milk dish would steam up again, it can, get that part wet again and pull down either that grease or the taste embedded there potentially. As well as if your meat spilled over onto the racks, your racks can have meaty grease on them, and then that could be touching your pan or whatever it is, your pot of milk that you're putting in. So these are probably the 2 main potential problems. So what's the best way to use an oven for 2 things? So an oven is probably the most basic thing we'll need to figure out how to use for both of them. Everyone needs, at one point or another, to use ovens. So the smartest thing to do is to determine within yourself, within your couple, what's your primary function of your oven. Meaning, make a default position. Is this going to be by default milk, or is this going to be by default meat? And then we're going to always work with that default. So what do we have here? We'll take an example, but we'll base it on the majority. We have 3 couples, so one of them has one. Are you generally cooking meat dishes or milk dishes in your oven?
More meat.
More meat.
Meat.
It doesn't even matter anymore because you guys are outvoted. It's meat?
But I mean,
Meat. Okay, I think most people probably use milk. Generally, I don't know, it's not the same. You cook it on your stovetop a lot. It's not always in the oven. Ovens are probably more chicken and meat. So let's say our oven is default meat, which means that we're going to cook meat in our ovens freely, however we want. We don't have to think about it. It's a meat oven. We can open, close, however you want, meaning covered, uncovered. Open, close, I meant covered, uncovered. However you want to use your oven for that default position, go ahead and use your oven. Now let's say you have this meaty oven, which you've actually cooked chicken and meat in, and now you want to go ahead and you want to use it for milk. So what do we do?
Could you just clean the oven?
The self-cleaning mode you talked about.
So self-cleaning mode, that's for sure. Self-cleaning anything gets rid of all issues. We'll get there in 1 second. So if you want, there's really two options. Let's say that's either you can re-kosher your whole oven and make it back to a new status, or you can leave it as is meat and figure out how to cook milk in it. Two potential problems, right? So let's go with the first one first. Let's say you want to leave your oven as meat. You don't want to kosher your oven again, so you're going to leave it as meaty, but you want to cook a milk dish in it. So the only way to do this is to avoid those two problems we said before. Which again, one problem is the racks. So all you have to do is really take a piece of aluminum foil. Recommended to take two because it tears a lot. Take 2 pieces of aluminum foil, cover the rack. Now there's not going to be any meaty residue that's going to be touching your pot. And even if it's there, it's going to be dry between the foil and your pot. So there will be no problem with the rack to your pot. And now the steam, this would only work if you're going to cover your milk covered. If your milk is covered, meaning covered well enough that no steam will exit this pot or this pan, whatever you're cooking in, this dish, so then you're fine because, again, your rack is covered, nothing's hitting the rack, and your lid is covered that no steam can come out of it, so it's not going to pull anything off the top, it's going to cook itself internally. You could do that for anything that works to be covered, that works to be cooked covered. The problem with this sometimes the pressure cooking, it could blow the thing open a little bit, can cause problems. If that does happen, you can ask a question. That's the only problem with it. And the other problem with it is a lot of things need to be cooked open. So it's just not always an option. So again, when you cover it, you have to make sure that it's actually well covered around, not just like a little thing over it, where the steam can still go up and down. So the other option is to kosher your oven. So the easiest option, like Mark and Denise said before, if you have a self-cleaning oven, we spoke at the end of the last class about how there's 2 processes of koshering items. You can either put them in boiling water, or you can make them open to intense heat. The level of heat in any self-cleaning oven is for sure above and beyond whatever that requirement is. And therefore, if you have a default meat oven, you decide you want to cook milk in it, you could just push the self-clean mode, have it run. When it's done, it is now undetermined again. It can be used for either milk or meat now. And now you just put your milk in it and cook your milk. Now, as a smart thing to do again, is part of the purpose of creating the default is, if we don't switch it back to the default when we're done, we're going to end up putting meat in it by mistake and just forget about it. So if you're planning on doing like a one-time cooking of milk, the smartest thing to do is after you finish cooking that milk and you're done, hit it again and always set it back to the default. You generally want to leave it at whatever you decided the default is, because you're just going to assume later, you're going to wake up the next morning, you're going to forget, I want to cook meat in it, you're going to forget you made it milk. So it's smarter to, return to the default position afterwards. That would just be the easiest thing to do. Now, let's say you don't have a self-cleaning oven. So what do? So what you have to do now is you have to clean the inside of your oven as well as you can. Just, scrub the top, make sure there's no grease anywhere, make sure there's nothing on it. Ideally, wait once you clean it, in addition to cleaning it, wait 24 hours since you've last used it for meat, if that's what you're doing. Because this is since you're not burning it out like you do in the other process, this is more similar to koshering it through boiling. It's comparable to that camp, which is the last time you have to let it sit for 24 hours. So you let it sit for 24 hours, and then you turn it on to the highest heat setting that your oven can do for an hour. Until it hits that setting, it stays for a little bit, roughly an hour, and once that's done, that oven is now considered kosher. You can use it for milk, for the other type if you'd like. And again, when you're done with that, you could just revert it back to the same process, just clean it. That'll be an easy cleaning process now. Clean it quickly, let it sit till the next day, and then just put it back again and set it back as a default. That's just a smart idea, because if we don't reset it, we just tend to forget that we didn't reset it. That's really the basic of ovens. It'd be the same thing with a broiler. If you have a broiler on the top shelf of your oven and you use the top of it for that, it's the same issues again. The issues are steam up and down again. So same process again as the oven. Anything you're putting in that oven has the same process. Okay, that is ovens. Is that clear? What do people have? Do you have self-cleaning ovens? Do you have self-cleaning? Is there self-cleaning or not? Self-cleaning. You have self-cleaning? You don't know.
Probably.
Oh, you have 2 ovens. So you have a milk and meat oven, so then you're easier off. Okay, fine. So then that's all extra information. Everyone can tell their friends. But self-clean is the easiest way to go, and 2 different ones are even easier than that. Okay, perfect. Moving on. The next item in our kitchens are microwaves. So microwaves are complicated because microwaves tend to splatter much more than stoves do. I never believed that, and then today God showed me it. I put a little thing of of like, I think it was like chili beans or something like that, like put it in the microwave. I like turned it on for a minute, and like I opened it up, like the whole thing was like covered in brown. I'm like, what happened? It was crazy, but it does splatter a lot more, and there's the venting systems are harder to clean. Microwaves tend to be very hard to clean and to kosher. It's definitely not recommended to be switching back and forth between milk and meat and microwaves. If you have a non-kosher microwave because you weren't keeping kosher and now you're making a kosher kitchen and Rabbi Klein's going to come and he's going to make your kitchen kosher, he probably won't tell you to get a new microwave, not sure. Probably make yours kosher. As a one-time thing to clean it well and to investigate well, we would do it. But microwaves are not so expensive and they're not so big. And it's just for sure recommended to have two of them just because of the complications in cleaning it well. If anyone does need to make theirs kosher, we can just ask me. I'll tell you how. I don't think it's necessary to do it unless everyone wants to. It's just, I think, TMI, no? Okay, so...
Is it different than koshering it for Pesach?
Koshering it for Pesach, I don't think most people would do at all. I think just because... Unless I'm wrong. I don't know. I wouldn't. I don't know. You could ask Generally, koshering things for Pesach are more stringent than they are during the year because since the laws of Pesach Chametz, generally we mentioned in last class, is a concept called bittul, which is nullification. So nullification is generally assumed to be 1 part to 60 parts, which means if I have 60 units of chicken soup and 1 unit relative to the units we're talking about of milk falls in, so we'll say that is nullified. You can't taste it. In the world of halacha and Jewish law, it doesn't exist. On Pesach, there's a stringency by chametz. That chametz is never bottled, even if it's 1 in 1,000, even if it's a small amount. It's never bottled. So things like microwaves that are very, very hard to clean. It could be people would be lenient. Ask whoever you ask your questions to. The people that have been around generally are hesitant to clean microwaves because even if there's a little bit of chametz left in it, it could be a problem. If you were to kosher, it's not hard to kosher them. It's just hard to know that you really did it 100%. That's why on Pesach it's more of a scary thing because
Pesach, or at least what I was taught, was you still have to have everything covered during Pesach, but in order to kosher it, you microwaved water for 10 minutes. Yeah,
so that's the process. The process of microwaving water is, the fear of a microwave is that it's things steam up in it. So the way you kosher it, because last time, easy in, easy out, right? If it became infused with taste with steam, so you take a cup of water, you put it in there for however long it takes for the water to steam out. And we say just like it became embedded with taste through the steam, it also comes out with the steam. That's the general principle, which is what you would do. Like if we make a kitchen kosher, if a client comes in, that's what he's going to do to make it kosher in that sense. Just specifically, certain microwaves are very hard to get all of the things out of, especially in the venting system, which could get hot also and transfer back and forth. Therefore, I think there may be a stringency by Pesach, but again, there are for sure people that wouldn't surprise me are lenient and definitely could be. Moving on, we have toasters. So when I say toasters, what I normally refer to could be referred to a little thing with bread that pops up. If you refer to a little thing with bread that pops up, it's probably not milk or dairy. Dairy or meat. I'm not sure what you put meat inside of it. It's probably parv. I guess there's certain milk things like pancakes or something like that maybe you'd put inside of it, but you can't really clean them, so I would just leave those as milk if that's what you have. Toasters like these also are very hard to clean once things, if you have like a pristine one like this, maybe it's easier. But generally they get dirty and things spill and splatter, and they're also very hard to clean. It's not so recommended to really have them shared for milk and meat. Again, it's recommended to just keep it as one thing. If that's an issue and anyone is in a duress that needs to change that, so talk to the rabbi, we can deal with it. Barbecue grills are impossible to clean. They have grease on them from years and years of meat. They're really, really hard to clean. The grease on the bottom, there is a fire there, and the fire theoretically should consume everything, but practically, if you look at your grills, it just doesn't always work like that. Also, the thing on the bottom that catches the grease, often, unless you remove that, that's full of grease. It's basically, it's possible, and for sure, again, if you'd want to make it kosher, you took this grate off and you stuck it in your self-cleaning oven, that would for sure be fine, because that would kosher be no worse. But generally, it's not really practical to make a grill kosher. Most people tend to have the default position on grills as being meaty. If anyone has milk as a default, we should talk about that separately. But the other thing just to be wary of is we mentioned in the past that you're not supposed to eat meat and fish together also. So if you were to grill salmon shouldn't really be grilled on the same grill as meat, and there's no real way to really clean it unless you have like another grate or something like that, and underneath it is clean. That could be another potential.
What if you heat it up hot enough?
Try it. It just doesn't work. If you scrub the grease off really well and it was clean, and again the bottom of it was, meaning when you have a fire on this grate, it's not actually focusing fire in each of these grates intensely. It's like when you close the top of it, it creates a certain cooking temperature that allows things to cook in it, but it's not really like directly, like we'll see by the stovetop, the fire generally is like directly, constantly koshering the grate on top of the stove. Because there's a fire like burning on that grate the whole time. On these, there's not normally a fire like on each of these grates constantly that we can assume that fire is going to constantly being like burning everything off. So barbecue grills are again not recommended. Yeah.
What if you had a piece of fish and you wrapped it really, really good in foil?
Right. So again, this is going to be a problem of touching it being on top of it. If you wrapped it in foil, or you just put a piece of foil underneath it, I don't know how well that would work in terms of the barbecue. I mean, I'm not such a professional barbecuer. I feel like would that work in terms of like being a good barbecue? Yeah, it's good. Okay, I don't know. So again, just make sure that your fish juices, avoid your fish juices like dripping down from it also, because that could cause a problem from when you put meat on next and you have your fish juices there also. That'll then be a problem the next step. So, but yeah, for sure, if you have a sealed thing, again, recommended to put 2 sheets of tinfoil down, just because these things tend to have problems. But yeah, if you did that, then that would be fine. I didn't know that works. That works, huh? Salmon, what do you do? You put salmon inside of
a bunch of vegetables and like a piece of fish and wrap it up and forget about it, and it's a great meal.
And it's better than doing that same thing in an oven. Like barbecue grills work better on that. Okay, well, you gotta try it. Sounds good. Specifically salmon, or it's any fish? Any fish. All right. Fins and scales. Stovetops. Stovetops are next. Stovetops are probably the second most complicated after ovens. Most commonly is, again, if you have 2 stovetops, perfect. You can have one for your meat, one for your milk, and you shouldn't have issues. If you have only one stovetop, which many people do, so again, you have to be careful now, because things generally tend to be hot by the stovetop, and things generally tend to be dirty. I don't mean dirty, I mean like have stuff inside of them when they're by the stovetop. So this would be a problem if you have milk and meat. Let's say you were cooking milk over here and meat over here. I mean, things boil over, or you're stirring it, and a noodle of macaroni and cheese flies out when you're stirring. These things happen all the time. This is why, in general, it's recommended, if possible, to avoid having both meat and milk pots and pans or dishes on the stove at the same time. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. You could do it. It's just, again, the cleaner and more organized and the way things are, it'll just avoid issues if you're able to keep your milk and meat separate. Also, if you have like a short pot here and a tall pot here, theoretically your short pot can steam onto your tall pot next to it, depending on how closely they are, which if one is one type and one the other, again, that could be a problem. If you realize afterwards, oh my gosh, there's a meat pot there and a milk pot there, and I didn't realize. If you didn't see anything happen, you don't have to suspect anything happened. You don't have to be paranoid about it. The halacha is, the law is that unless you see something go wrong, we assume everything is fine. So therefore, even if you didn't mean to do it like this, whatever happened, nothing splattered that you know of, nothing changed that you know of. You even found a milk spoon in your meat drawer and you have no clue how it got there. It doesn't matter, because you could just assume whenever you picked it up, spaced out, put it in the wrong drawer. Unless you know something happened, you don't have to be concerned anything happened. So again, no worries there. Now, the question is, how do we cook both meat and milk, even one after the other, on the stovetop? So the grates themselves, now this is a gas burner, which by electric burners is even easier, because this whole part gets red hot, or some people have like the metal coil electric burners. When those, what kind of burners do you have? We'll just talk about the kind that has last month. You have the right side, like that kind of electric, or the? Yeah. Okay, and what kind do you guys have?
We have coil, but we're going to buy gas.
You have coil, electric coil, and you're going to get gas. Okay, so we have to talk about all the times. We got all 3. What do you guys have? You have 2, no?
We've got gas.
You have gas. Okay, so let's talk about whatever. Both of these are practical then. So the grates themselves. Now grates are really utensil, right? So if chicken soup spills over onto the grates, these grates should now be a meat utensil. So how could I put my milk pot on top of these grates once these grates just had chicken soup on them? So the grates, once the fire has been on these grates, you leave the fire on. So your fire tends to burn off whatever's on the grates, and your fire basically keeps these grates constantly being koshered. And therefore, they're going to end up being parv almost always. If as soon as it spilled over, you turned it off, that you shouldn't do that. You should leave it on for a few seconds just to let it burn it off and kosher whatever on it. So the grates tend to not be a problem, and you can use the same grates. Meaning, there are people in the world that will say, "Well, use these two for meat and these two for milk." You don't have to do that. If you want to do that again, the more care you want to take, probably the less questions you'll have. But there's no need to do that. So the grates are going to be fine because they're going to kosher themselves. But when your chicken soup spills, this area here is going to get dirty. Now again, if you clean that part off right away, so then there'll be nothing left there. It'll be clean, and that's fine. The only potential problem would be if your milk fell on it afterwards, maybe you shouldn't eat it, if your actual food fell on it. But assuming that you just have a pot on top of it, and that area underneath is clean, so it's fine, because there's nothing there. But if you left your chicken soup underneath and you didn't clean it up right away, and there's like a little pool of chicken soup, and then you put your milk pot on top of it, and you turn the fire on, so you'll notice that fire will start to heat up that little pool of soup underneath it, and that soup will steam into the bottom of your pot. So therefore, the only things you really have to be concerned about, that would obviously be a problem. The only thing you have to be concerned about really is keeping the part clean underneath it, that it shouldn't have the other type of it there. Meaning if there's burnt stuff there, it's fine, it's not food. We're talking about when there's actual food remains residue underneath it that could potentially then steam back up to a different type of pot on top of it. And again, this is wise to, it's much easier to clean things up when they happen than later. It's just always true. Everything's easier to wash when it's fresh. So it's just the reality. But you could do it whenever. And again, there's no problem if you don't do it for another week. It's just, that would create more likely problems if you put the wrong part on top of it. Okay, I think that's it. These types of things. So on an electric stovetop, these generally get red hot. And this does the equivalent of koshering itself also. I mean, what happens here, when that gets red hot, that will keep itself constantly being koshered also, and anything that spills on this part will be totally fine. You have the same problem again, something spills over here, this part could become meaty over here, because this part tends to also get somewhat hot. And then if afterwards, some noodles fell on here, so you just should throw out those few noodles and probably not eat them, or you can call someone and ask if it's significant, because there are variables to that. But that would be the only potential problem, would be if something fell over here. Here you won't have the problem of steam underneath it, because there's no area below. So you're kind of easier off with that kind of stovetop.
What do you do if you have, and not that we have one of the inductive stoves?
How does it work?
They stay cool unless you put metal on it and the metal heats up.
I don't know. That's cool. How does that work? Are those common? I've never heard of that before.
They're new.
How do you set a setting on it?
For what?
I mean, how hot do you sort of how hot you want it to get, and then the metal senses it? Only pots can get hot.
Like they have a thing where they cut a pot in
Only the pot gets hot, you're saying. So if your kid takes like a tissue and puts it on the grate,
it wouldn't get hot.
Nothing would happen.
They have an image of they take a pan, cut it in half, put an egg on it. The part that's on the pot cooks, and the part that's off the pot doesn't.
That's very cool. I mean, if it stays cold, then taste probably won't get embedded in it, so you'd be, I guess, better off in a certain sense. I mean, anything underneath it, I don't know how it would. If it wouldn't heat up, I don't know, would the pot be hot enough to heat it up? I guess it'd be a practical question. If the heat of the pot can create a large enough heat to cause those to go up, then that would be a problem. If not, probably you'd be better off like that, I guess. But that's cool. What's it called again? An inductive stovetop. Okay, cool. Okay, counters. Counters, again, like everything else in the kitchen. If you have two of them, great. Makes it easier. Here's our picture, and our beautiful picture of all our kosher series. They have nice two counters here, one on each side. Just make one meat, one milk, and life is easy like that until you make a mistake, but generally easier. Let's say you only have one counter space area. So, again, counters are not practical to constantly kosher back and forth. Most countertops, again, we mentioned last time, not every material can be koshered, but most can. And most countertops you could kosher if you need to. But once you kosher them, it's not practical to keep changing them. So again, the smartest idea would be, if you only have one, you can choose one default for it, whatever you normally need it for meat, and then you can just, put meat on that counter and not worry about it. And if you want to use it for milk, just, lie a towel down underneath it or a trivet or any of these types of things, and that will just save it from touching it. There's no real problems of steam, no problems of heat here generally. Problem is just of residue or something on the counter itself. So as long as your counters are clean, you shouldn't put hot milk and hot meat on it. You should choose one, put the other one on a towel. But generally, for sure, ex post facto will be fine if everything was clean, because again, it's generally not wet. There's no liquid between them, and therefore, even if the pot is hot, ideally you shouldn't do it, but it'll almost always be fine ex post facto. That's basically the deal with counters. There's a few just general kitchen concerns, I guess I would say. I don't know if it's really concerns. But number one, so spice shakers. Spice shakers are interesting. If you pour your spices directly over your soup, so then some suggest that steam is going to go right into your spice shakers, in which case they can make that spice shaker meaty. Not all agree to that. But ideally you could if you pour the spices on your hand and put it in, it's preferred. If not, don't worry about it. Just another thought. There are those that are careful for that. The other thing is, we mentioned before, some people keep utensils suspended above. I said salami as my example before, but probably more common is utensils and stuff. And if you're keeping utensils behind it, so that could be a concern. If you have meat utensils here, and you're cooking hot cocoa in the back over here, you can easily steam onto that. So just something you might not have thought of, just bring it to the forefront. That could potentially be a problem. I should say washing dishes. Washing dishes or a dishwasher. So let's say you're washing dishes. So we mentioned already, the way taste gets transferred in the dishwashing sense be through heat. So if you have your water on very, very hot, I can't put my hand in hot water. I get very sensitive to it. Some people can my mother could put her hand in 500 degree water. I don't know how she does it. But anyways, different people are sensitive to different amounts. If your water is extremely hot when you're cooking it, generally if your hands are inside of it, it won't be extremely hot. Some people wear gloves. I've heard, never seen. But some people wear gloves when they wash dishes. If you do that, then the water might be really hot. If you're using very, very hot water, so then you could have a problem if you were washing milk and meat dishes together in the sink at the same time, because if they're both dirty, you have, a bowl of your milk bowl, and you have your other meat dishes there also, and you're pouring boiling hot water in, so that could create a hot environment for both milk and meat. So ideally, we should have separate places, not, if you wash in the same sink, but have separate basins like this, something like that, for milk and meat. And even if you're going to wash them in the same sink, you should rinse, do one of them, and then afterwards make sure there's no meat chunks or residue in the sink, because if you drop your spoon in it and it falls on a piece of meat with hot water there, that could be a problem. So just do one and then the other one. Also, that's that's if you're washing the dishes. Dishwashers are also, they're very hard to change. They're kind of like microwaves. If you need to make them kosher once, you can clean them really well. You could run a cycle on high and you can make them kosher. I know Rabbi Klein, when he comes to kosher your home, he won't tell you need to get a new dishwasher. He'll make it kosher. But in a practical day-to-day sense of switching back and forth between milk and meat, it's generally not practical to cook, but to wash both your milk and your meat, even in different rinse cycles in the same dishwasher. Because unless someone wants to ask me a question, can I use it for milk and for meat? If my dishes are all clean when they go in. I said, if your dishes are all clean when they go in, why are you washing them? Well, they're not sparkling and clean. They're just I rinsed them off and I scrubbed them already once. I'm like, you can do whatever you want, enjoy. But generally, I don't know, we at least put dirty dishes in our dishwasher. If you put dirty dishes in a dishwasher, that often has meaty residue and stuff remaining behind, so it's not recommended to use them separately. Okay, any questions? Oh, refrigerators. That was the last thing. You asked about refrigerators. So again, refrigerators tend to be a little bit easier because refrigerators tend to be cold most of the time. You're not supposed to, nothing to do with Judaism, put hot things, even if you want to put your soup in the fridge, The refrigerator companies recommend not putting them in hot because it's bad for the mechanism and forces it to overwork too much. So generally we're not putting in very hot items in the refrigerator. So it won't be a problem in terms of practical transfers. The only thing that might happen in refrigerators is, what we mentioned before, is soaking. If you didn't realize you had some kind of, chicken soup there and you didn't realize your cheese fell off the shelf and someone ended up inside of your chicken soup, and then if you didn't notice it, it's probably not so common, but it's something that could fall off and end up in the wrong place. If it would soak there for 24 hours, that could potentially be a problem. Also, just residue, if things are open in them, or they're just, the pot wasn't totally clean, there was some residue on the side, and that's next to something milk, just be concerned for that residue. So again, the main thing is just to be careful and try to keep them separate as possible. Most people don't have two refrigerators. Most people just have one and kind of keep the things separate. And again, even if they were to touch in this type of situation and get dirty, all it would really necessitate would be to rinse it off in cold water and get the residue off. So that wouldn't be such a problem with kosher. I mean, there's no major issues. They have to kosher your pot or put in boiling water. Those tend to not be a problem with refrigerators. Okay, I think I've exhausted all the parts of the kitchen that I've thought of. If there's other parts to your kitchen that you use or you have questions or anything else that you want to know about, please. Yeah.
All right. So if we have one stainless steel sink, and we don't
a single one.
Right. Well, no. Two bowls, but
you have two containers.
Right.
I should have put a picture. I didn't have a picture of that in there. Okay, two containers.
And we don't want it to be just trafe. We don't want the.
One second. It's one piece, but there's two bowls, so to speak, with a wall between them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
this.
One is the garbage
It's a double
disposal
sink.
and one
Right,
has
right,
okay.
exactly.
You have the
Yeah.
same
So
thing.
we're not a big milk family. Generally, we do disposable for milk, so it's not really an issue. But if we were to get milk dishes, could we cover one side and have it not be considered trafe?
Yeah, so even if they're connected in this situation, it's normally going to be fine because the metal in the middle is never going to get hot. Meaning, taste is not going to be able to transfer from one side to the other side. Because let's say the way taste generally transfers is it'll go through it, right? The meat will fall on one side of it and it'll have to travel through that metal to the other side of it.
So where that could be a problem, I think, is the dishwasher. Because the dishwasher can back hot water back up through it.
Oh, right. I mean, generally, water that backs up. That was your question. There's a few different parts to the sink, right? For the sink, generally, you could have, even if it's one piece, you could have one part milk, one part meat. Won't be a problem. Again, try to be careful for splashing and think that's what. Again, if you want to cover it, that's for sure an easier option, and then you don't have to worry about it. Generally, water that backs up. Maybe the dishwasher is very hot. I don't know. Well, generally, water that backs up from sinks don't tend to be Yad Soleil anymore. They don't tend to be 110 degrees hot. They're normally cooler by then. Even if they went in that hot, they're not that hot when they come back up. So it's normally not a problem. If dishwashers are different, I don't know. I don't know of it being different. But if they keep the heat better or something like that, and it comes up hotter, it could be a problem. But again, dishwashers we'd anyways recommend to just have it uniquely for one thing.
Right.
So.
But okay, and secondly, the dishwasher. Can you kosher a plastic tub dishwasher?
If your house is not currently kosher and you want to have a kosher kitchen, for sure the opinion of the DK is they're going to come in and they will kosher your dishwasher, including the plastic parts, and every part of it will all be kosher. Yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
To constantly do that back and forth, there's a general principle, I forgot to mention this, general principle that we try not to kosher things from milk and meat back and forth. Like even utensils, you have a spoon, you try not to switch them back and forth, even though you could just take it in boiling water, use it for the other. The rabbis are concerned you're going to forget when you just used it yesterday. So things that aren't absolutely necessary, like an oven, you need to be able to go back and forth because people don't always have to use. Things that aren't necessary, and especially things that are very, very hard to clean, and it's questionable how well you can kosher it. So if you need to kosher it, we'll say fine, you can kosher it, but to do that constantly back and forth wouldn't be recommended. Yeah.
Is milk in general considered kosher? Does it have to? Are there special koshering for milk? Like if I go to 7-Eleven and get a gallon of milk.
Yeah. So general milk is considered kosher as long as it's cow milk on it. There's an interesting case in
cow milk. Yeah. Sorry.
No. So the reason why you can assume that it's cow milk is because there's FDA requirements that they're not allowed to change and put anything else inside of it. There was an interesting case that came up in Illinois. The CRC actually worked on this case that there was some. Because of that, you can assume that based on FDA requirements that all the milk is kosher because it's all from cows. I forgot the exact case of the scenario of the case, but it was something where they wanted to allow there to be another kind of milk. I think it was camel milk, some other kind of milk meaning I think officially the FDA allows you to use any mammal's milk. It doesn't have to be camel milk and call it milk to be titled milk, but it was never practical from a monetary perspective for anyone to ever use anything else other than cow milk. But there was something else that recently came up in the Illinois area. I'll have to look it up and get back to that case. You can Google it.
I don't know if I want to. It sounds.
And no, so the CRC took it, went to like the state court or whatever it was to try to legislate it to make sure that you would have to label it as being, can't be labeled as regular milk. Because if that would exist, if there was somehow now some concern that legally you'd be able to call something regular milk without it coming from a cow, that would obviously produce kosher problems, and you then have to have better certification on each one. But for now, definitely is a case that everything's fine.
Actually, made me think of a question. So, like, I know, like, sometimes at, like, grocery stores, like Tom Thumb, they have, like, a separate kosher dairy section.
No.
What would differentiate that from, like, the regular dairy?
So if it's just milk, regular, like we said before, milk is fine. But milk is uniquely fine because generally milk has no additives, and it's just milk that's been pasteurized. That's all milk normally is, so there's no kosher concerns with it. Just about every other product, there's flavors and stuff added into it. So, for example, cheeses and yogurts and all other dairy products, you would need to have proper kosher certification on, because just to ensure that all the flavors going into it are fine. If you have a kosher certification, you go to Tom Thumb, you go to the regular yogurt section, they have kosher yogurts there, even though they're not in the kosher dairy section. There's nothing wrong with that. Those has a kosher certification on it, it's fine. The kosher dairy section a lot of time is something else called Chalav Yisrael, which is the concept of Chalav Yisrael basically is that officially all milk really has to be supervised with a Jew in the room at the time of the milking. The reason why we're lenient on all milk in general, like Mark was saying before, is because Rabbi Feinstein writes that in countries such as America and other places where there's high penalties, if you would, and it's government regulated and watched, if you were to change what goes inside of it, so that satisfies the same requirements, it's just as if a Jew was in that room watching it.
Right.
So it's considered the same thing. Most people rely on that. There are people that don't rely on that and say, no, we want to go stringent and make sure there's actually a Jew in the room watching it, be supervising it. So that's what we refer to nowadays as Chalav Yisrael.
Okay.
And those, so you'll have in the dairy section of Tom Thumb, a lot of the products there will be the Chalav Yisrael products, which are generally more expensive than the non-versions.
And I wondered about that because I'm like, well, cheese is cheese.
Right, well, because they have to do with the mashgiach, and
though.
there's only a few plants that make like that, and they have to import them from East Coast and stuff, and it's not just like the same craft.
So cheese I looked into, there's an ingredient called rennet in it that's made from
animal intestine.
The lining of a cow's stomach.
Right, that's how you make the cheese.
Yeah.
That's one of the enzymes to...
So the kosher ones, they have something else.
Okay.
Just
Good
practice.
to know.
Because I was thinking about that when we started going kosher.
I wouldn't have thought that though, because cheese comes from cows.
Well, cows are meat.
Well, there's pork rennet also.
Well, because milk comes from
I guess
cows.
you can make
Exactly.
And happy milk.
anything.
Yes. And happy cows come from
Just
where?
practically speaking, does would you say that Rabbi Klein?
Rabbi Klein is the one who will come to your house to make your house kosher when that time comes.
Do they charge
He's the head of the DK.
Do they charge you to come in and do that?
I have no idea. Does anyone know? Do they charge to do that?
Curious.
Found out yet.
Yeah.
We will.
I could find out for you. I definitely could find out for you.
Just wondering.
I don't know offhand what they do.
I think it's just part of the Dallas kosher membership dues that they do.
Yeah, I think they'll do it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't pay the membership dues.
And donations.
Donations,
donate.
obviously. Yeah.
But if it is, I don't think it's anything
It's
Anything
a great
major?
organization.
Oh,
But okay, fine. So, any other questions?
Granite countertops, I hear they're fine.
So, granite countertops are normally made from one solid piece of rock. That's a real granite countertops, or one piece of rock. If it's one piece of rock, that's the best thing to have, because if it's one piece, it's easy. You say the taste kind of like transfers equally, and you can kosher it equally, and it's like the easiest thing to deal with. There's like fake granite they have when you want to have like pleather type things. They have like fake granite, which is actually composed of it's made of rock, but it's made of like cement, like made of like doesn't look like cement, it looks like granite, but it's made of a lot of little rocks that look like they're one sheet, but they're not actually one sheet. That's much more problematic because you can't kosher the same way, because it's like 22,000 different vessels rather than just one vessel. But if it's a real granite countertop, that is one of the easier things to switch over to make kosher. So that'd be fine.
You just pour boiling water in it, right?
There's different ways to do it. Generally, just pour boiling water over it. Yeah. Be careful to hit almost every spot and stuff. But that's, yeah, it's a pretty simple process. Some people take an iron water on it. Sounds more exciting, though. When I was learning these laws, I remember the rabbi was teaching me. His name was Rabbi Lerner, who I learned these laws, all the laws of kosher by. So he said, like, some people say you could put an iron to make it, like, heat it up on the spot, but like, I value your guys' lives more than that, so please don't try that. And someone goes like, I've done that every year for the last 15 years. Like, it's fine. There's nothing happens. I don't know. Check it out yourself or not, whatever you so desire. Okay, great. This is the part 3, kitchen. Any other questions that come up, you can always text, email, whatever. Same with the beginning of next class. This is really now completed, in my mind, basically most of the practical kosher kitchen stuff. We did kosher products, milk and meat, and the kosher kitchen. The next class is going to be on basically almost everything else kosher, other concepts that, whatever, we'll talk about them then, but everything else that comes up relating to kosher, more or less. Any other questions that are regarding like the kosher kitchen stuff, think of, test them out, questions that come up by you, pass them forward, and great, looking forward. Feel free to take a little more food before they leave.